Welcome back to my channel, Famous and Fabulous. Tens of thousands of individuals crowded Saint. The Argentine flag at Peter's Square was folded with care and positioned next to a well-known portrait. Within the church Bergoglio, Maria Elena gripped her will. As she read the text, her voice faltered. "Leave no material treasure in my concluding lines. However, I leave you a priceless gem." Nobody was aware of what was in the will, yet. The response from the family encapsulated the attention of the globe. They weren't. They were crying, but they were disappointed. Because of the financial loss, but because of what they had recently discovered did. The things that Pope Francis left behind that made his own family members weep during a funeral among the world's most powerful individuals. The birthplace of Jorge Mario Bergoglio was. Flores is a working-class neighborhood. In Argentina's Buenos Aires, his family of Italian immigrants led modest lives, neither wealthy nor impoverished, yet it was necessary to save everything in the house. His dad worked as a railway accountant. Mother, a calm but orderly homemaker. Jorge was the oldest of 5 children, used to accepting accountability. His early years were nothing like that of millions of additional kids in Buenos, save from one thing he consistently. When someone was depressed, pay close attention. Even Jorge, a stranger when he was a teenager, enjoyed music and football, and he was a huge advocate for San Lorenzo, and participated in playing football on the streets with his pals. Despite his best efforts, he did not believe he would become a priest following after high school. He pursued a degree in chemical engineering. Before working in, few people are aware that he has a laboratory. Worked at a nearby nightclub as a bouncer and as a family's housekeeper to make additional cash in a young person's life. Jorge. The church wasn't important to man. Instead, independence, experimenting, and creating, like every other young man, making a living. A pivotal moment occurred in 1958, when Jorge was 21 following a sincere confession, in a he claimed to have been moved by the modest church. Nobody coerced him into the core religious life, however. His mum was adamantly against to it, but Jorge made the choice to become a Jesuit, had blocked any other secular routes, and he received his priestly ordination in 1969 and 1973. Amid the political unrest in Argentina, he rose to the position of provincial. This was a difficult time for Jesuits when the military government abducted and tortured clergymen, scholars, and dissident. Jorge was thought to be chastised. But it also happened during this time when he gained a valuable lesson on patience, quiet, and the cost of steadfast. In 1998, he turned into, notably, the Archbishop of Buenos Aires, declined to relocate to the Episcopal Palace's decision to live in a tiny apartment in a low-income neighborhood. He prepared his own food and did everything himself. Washing and took the bus to the local police station, referred to him as the bishop that everyone has seen. While riding the train, he was made a cardinal. Jorge remained unchanged in 2001. His way of life, he merely brought a little carrying a bag to the Vatican during the conclave in 2005. He was regarded as a candidature for Pope but retracted there. The 2013 championship round following the Pope Benedict XVI, Jorge resigned. His replacement was Mario Bergoglio. Assuming the name of the first Pope, Francis, historically to originate from the South Latin America's hemisphere and society. Jesus' decision to use the name Francis in honor of Saint Francis of Assisi, who sacrificed his wealth to help the underprivileged, was the first unambiguous declaration that required no justification after that day. The world started to witness a new pope. No magnificent red penthouse at the Vatican. He didn't wear sparkling robes or leather shoes. Resided in Casa Santa Marta, which was simpler and operated a Fiat 500. But many others did not think that this simplicity was genuine, believing that the picture was manufactured, while those who shared Buenos Aires with him claimed that for decades he lived in the same manner. Francis didn't opt for simplicity in order to it was his method of being the trip to the Vatican from Flores was not a victorious one, but a string of choices that went against Social Jorge Mario's expectations. One by one, Bergoglio sacrificed comfort, wealth, and position, cheers and even. Minor details like the every step had a cost, including the privilege to quiet. Additionally, of everything he left behind, the only thing he retained was the rationale behind, entered the chapel when he was 21 years old in first, a straightforward conviction that the only reason to live is for other people. Issues during his first year, he was vocal in his disapproval of priests who led opulent lives, referring to them as lost in their religious beliefs in an effort to, Francis was not going to ride in comfort, an expensive vehicle in a community where the impoverished pleaded in the streets. The declaration was not just words, it was supported by action, mandated a thorough examination of the Vatican financial institutions, that he established laws against money laundering, and he called for extraordinary public financing reporting. But the method is more crucial. Francis examines world affairs from a moral viewpoint. He does not distinguish his position as Pope from his duty. He released it to the world in 2015, Laudato Si, a document requesting humanity to re-evaluate its connection. The document was not intended for nature, not only at Catholics, but at all people. According to Francis, the earth is our common home, and informed that degradation of the environment wasn't a moral dilemma, but a scientific one, when profit is prioritized over accountability. The first people to suffer are the poorest. Thereafter created Fratelli Tutti, a declaration advocating for fraternity transcends ideological, racial, and religious divides. He maintained in his lines that conflict does not emerge not from disparities, but from the lack of communication and trust. The Muslims embraced the document, and Orthodox leaders, which was a significant step towards mending divisions that date back hundreds of years. He released Del Lexit Knows in 2024. For the first time, the Pope asked a serious question. Artificial intelligence and technology was worried about more than just machines. Francis also cautioned against replacing people. The world's loss of moral identity, he referred to it as a crisis driven by algorithms. Regarding ethical silence, if a pope in the future should peruse these documents that he may come across, that Francis's actual will was not a paper that was sealed in a Vatican secure, but a publicly constructed set of ideals, gradually, over more than 10 years of managing the church. I'm not a bank owner. In a private conversation, Count Francis once stated, meeting with reporters, I don't have a residence, yet I am aware of what I am leaving behind. And he expressed it with humility rather than arrogance. A man's voice who understands the percussions of each choice made when a pope declines to give and own belongings to his family members and declines to allow the church to become into a dumping ground for what he leaves behind in dark money is ethical standard for upcoming generations. Francis didn't call them himself valuables. But when Maria Elena and she family members go over the documents, they realized that they were his sole bequest to them was something intangible, incalculable, yet sufficient to bring them to tears during his burial, because this brother and man had lived as he, and he passed away without anyone being capable of claiming that he had compromised what he thought the remnants of the Pope's family. By the end, Francis had 4 siblings, but of his life, the sole family member he retained infrequent communication with his younger Maria Elena Bergoglio, a sister who resided in Argentina, along with their 2 kids, a little family. While his more than 10 years as Pope stayed out of the spotlight, they didn't use any evidence, use power for their own benefit there. There was no proof that they were given Vatican financial assistance for. Francis was actively involved in that, kept for years what he considered his twice a month. Sister, the calls weren't concerning faith rather than Vatican politics. Usually, the subjects were food, weather, or just inquiring. Are you still? Take a stroll. Francis once said to his bodyguards should not document or maintain a journal. When he called home, he thought that if every discussion I had with my family became into a piece of history, that I would no longer. Maria Elena had never followed her family. A spiritual route. She served as a school administrator leading a typical suburban living in Buenos. When Jorge was elected Pope, Cyrus was the only one family member ventured to inquire, asking him directly, "Am I now a member of the Vatican, brother?" He answered, "As long as you maintain I am still Jorge," he said in 2025. Francis's memoirs, which were released under he penned a brief piece about hope. "My sister did not ask me to," Maria Elena said, "understand more, but to ensure that I hadn't lost my identity." It was an uncommon section wherein he discussed his family in a formal document because the majority of Pope Francis's life is a narrative, without a family history at the Maria. Elena did not show up for the burial. She stood behind the camera in the family pews. She didn't read a will that day, asset statement, but a handwritten 3 items were included in the document. Francis requested that his family maintain 1, not to accept presents, donations, or menial labor from any company that utilized his name, 2, not to release letters or memoirs or private images if the goal was to turn a profit, 3, in order to stay alive. Since the family had survived without on their standing as unique for many, those privileges are 3 stern words. But for Maria Elena, they were Francis's method of staying loyal to. His final principle was not to turn reverence into a tool following the funeral. She briefly informed the media that he left us with nothing to divide, something to save in remembrance of Francis's Maria Elena's sons have 2 nephews as well. Never made a public appearance at a Vatican if they decline interviews. Don't show up in the media and refrain from using the name Bergoglio to look for chances. Friends claim that they were instructed since childhood that Uncle Jorge is not a famous individual. He simply does something unique. Operate in a unique setting. That vanity is not the source of attitude. Originates from a concept decided upon by the family's remaining members to allow Francis to serve as Pope without being constrained by familial norms. This differs greatly from the picture of politicians frequently come from wealthy households, or faith in which family members can become a sort of central power satellite. Francis's family members are bull. Doesn't add to the value he left. They were values. It was the path too reluctant to exploit it, as it was the attitude of maintaining a suitable distance due to his departure and the halloo, only the values that they screamed, not because to the loss of material possessions, not because of disillusionment, but because they realized that the family's duty did not grant them favors, but instead provided them with a more difficult task to maintain the memory of a man who lived up to his words. Integrity's cost is among the first. His reputation took a serious hit when his response to the sexual abuse in Chile scandal in 2018. Francis first stood up for a bishop who was accused of hiding abuse, claiming he had not witnessed any obvious proof. The claim right away caused a backlash among numerous victims. Appeared and Catholic organizations called for the sake of openness. Francis later acknowledged an independent had been sent to him in Lainolam era examination and acknowledged their assignation of the whole Chilean bishops, but his faith was wounded by difficult to heal, and in the opinion of many, it was when he lost the integrity he had put so much effort into uphold. Francis's rulings have also become socially provocative when he permitted the blessing of same-sex couples. He received criticism from both parties in 2023. Conservatives charged him with going contrary to what the church teaches. Progressives claimed he didn't make much progress. Sufficient since he had yet to accept. Francis did not amend the same-sex marriage agreement, either send a press conference or the text to he only stated, "No one should be rejected affection." Within the Vatican, his reforms addressed the most delicate. He stopped being sneaky with areas funds. Several investments were dissolved. Foundations thought to be connected to oligarchs, and significantly put a stop to the several senior citizens' financial immunity cardinals. Actions caused him to become alone, internally at one time. As stated by Il Messaggero, a cardinal group sought in secret to get him to step down. Francis proceeded, mentioning his poor health, resigning from their positions or substitutes for many of his closest colleagues on social media, particularly on conspiracy. Theories on extremist channels revealed that Francis is hiding assets, that he is a duplicitous individual living destitution to hide his inner even power, one unconventional news website. These people refer to him as a snake in a white cap. Charges are unproven, yet they have proliferated extensively, particularly in conservative. Those that disapprove of his method of tensions in society also originate from global politics in 2016. Francis openly disapproved of the building of a US-Mexico border wall, requesting, Christian, who placed him directly, disagreement with US President Donald. Since then, Trump has been the target of right-wing media outlets' assaults, but he hasn't taken back anything he said. Rather, he has maintained that faith is no tutelized. To construct walls, the cost was not simply put. It was the isolation of questioned by the system that he, a trusted person, was once told by head Francis. No one is as hostile as the one priest who makes an effort to maintain order, never revealed to the public but was subsequently verified in the priest's private, Francis's external diary, to be a well-liked leader throughout the world. But within the Vatican, his reforming. Many forces are displeased with the decisions. Francis is aware of it and accepts it, since he is aware that if he plays, avoiding disagreement is the only way to keep it secure. The legacy he will leave behind is among jeopardize the luminous legacy that in the evening, St. Peter Square was entirely, silently, empty. Individuals stood for hours, without a plan, coordinators, or guidelines, just the light from the candles in tens of, the reflection of thousands of uplifted hands on the old stone walls that some people brought images of Pope Francis that were held by others. He had merely bits of paper with lines on it. Composed the most often used phrase that you live as you believe was the theme of the night. Africa to South America via Europato. Little Asian Catholic. Communities, parishes across are hosting memorial liturgies. But what's really noteworthy is that a lot of the festivities aren't from churches, but from individuals. A Rio de Janeiro janitors in a group lighted a little altar on the pavement, candles, and read aloud excerpts from a group of pupils at La Toato. C. Nairobi stayed on campus and read, and an English translation of Fratelli Tutti's pictures don't require direction from the church. They take place in silence and alone. Although it's true that not everyone shared every Francis's choice, but many others thought. His fundamental legacy of kindness without declaration and empathy without logic in a world that is becoming more and more divided by politics, ideology, and technology. There are no rules that reflect Francis's legacy. Is the decision to live a leisurely life. Clearly, he lives for other people. Declared, I don't intend to leave behind. All I want to be is anything fantastic. If I am heard, I will be remembered. Showed up on the text's final page. Maria Elena's reading during the funeral. There was just no preaching or manifesto. A kind ending from a guy who never, years later, he placed himself at the center. Scholars will undoubtedly summarize his death. The number of people who ruled under Francis. How many financial documents were issued? How many internal affairs reforms were but for the majority of those who encountered him, even once, what they most recall? It's the manner he does things, not the policies. Bowed, shook hands, and exhibit, refused to allow formal distance to mask. The person, on the day he came, I was going to bow to him when I remembered a staff. He is a member of the Santa Marta guest house. Just call me Jorge. We both work, he added, here. This information is not documented in the books, but these kinds of details that prolong Francis's life more than the legacy he left behind. Any sermon cannot be measured or divided. It is not transferable, and is not in. It has no legal will and is not in a bank market worth, yet it's evident in the how individuals alter after encountering him, in how his family members maintain the values he upheld, and in the manner, when he arrives, the impoverished feel appreciated. Without any formalities, Maria Elena didn't talk once more following the burial. She went back to her regular life. In When a Foreigner Approaches Buenos Aires journalist for an interview, she stated only, "A pope is not being mourned. We are grieving a sibling." And the most difficult, it's difficult to accept his death, yet must cling to his convictions when, there, the world is changing so swiftly. There wasn't any music during the last moments of the service with no well-known hymns, just the tape softly played Francis's voice, because it's obvious if I leave you anything. The belief that virtue has a place, whether in the Vatican or elsewhere in the globe. Maybe what people are doing on the streets. It's not what you remember. About Pope Francis, he clung to during his lifetime, although what he was prepared to forfeit in order to retain. He kept the treasure's story intact, which brought his family to tears is not about money, but also a person's lifestyle, such that his loved ones ultimately don't feel as though they've lost. But they must go on if you also discovered anything to consider from his life. Just post a comment. And we would love to hear your thoughts and whether you, if this video was helpful, remember to distribute it to others who share it and sign up to ensure you don't miss the. Thank you for staying and for the next amazing stories till the very end.